If you are currently single and you're anything like me, you have probably grown pretty frustrated with the status of the modern dating scene. Between trying to navigate dating apps, situationships, being ghosted maybe, it almost feels like what we're trying to navigate has become something much more complex than what is supposed to be getting to know people and ultimately getting into committed relationships. I came across some pretty eye-opening statistics that I want to go over in regards to some of the changes that have taken place over the past several decades, and I want to dig into some of the reasons behind these changes or potential reasons, and also talk about some tips that we as individuals might be able to employ to combat some of these changes. So from a raw statistics perspective, what are some of the issues that we're seeing? Well, first of all, many more people are single than historically in the past. One survey showed that 42% of all American adults are single at any given time, which if that number already seems high to you, it gets even crazier when you look at the younger cohort. For the age group of 18 to 24, this survey showed that 83% of women reported being single and 88% of men in this 18 to 24 cohort reported being single, which is just such a crazy number. It's almost hard to believe. This is just one survey that showed this, but the fact that any survey could even get numbers this high is really pretty crazy. And then beyond dating, we are seeing changes in the marriage world as well, which probably comes at no surprise. If less people are dating, then less people are going to be getting married. And if they do, people are getting married later as well. For example, in the 1950s, people on average were getting married in their early 20s, whereas today that median age has shifted completely more toward our late 20s. Women on average getting married around 28 and men on average getting married around 30. Now, this isn't all necessarily bad. For example, a lot of studies show that people who get married a little bit later are more likely to stay married or be married longer. So this could have a positive effect, which is great, but there are negative effects that come along with this later marriage as well. One of the main things is that people are having less kids, which surface level may not seem like an issue. I believe that everybody obviously has a choice whether or not they want to have kids at all. If they do want to have kids, you should be able to have as many as you want or as few as you want. But there is the glaring issue of potential underpopulation problems. So the replacement rate is generally agreed upon to be 2.1 children per woman. So in order to keep a stable population, every woman needs to have 2 children, which makes sense because she needs to have one to replace herself and one to replace a male counterpart. Recent US numbers are showing that our replacement rate is more hovering around 1.6 or 1.7, which is pretty far ways off from that 2.1 number. And although underpopulation may not seem like a big issue, because I feel like there's always this talk of overpopulation being a potential huge issue. The problem with underpopulation, well, there's many, some of them being things like major labor shortages, reduced economic growth, as well as putting a big strain on things like Social Security or similar programs. But I'm not going to get too much into the issue of underpopulation because I think that's a topic for another day. But just being aware that it is something that many countries in the world are starting to think about more seriously. So the question becomes, why are people starting to become seemingly allergic to being in committed relationships? Well, let's start with the obvious one. The one that has been a point of attack for several years now is the whole world of the dating apps. And I think there's a lot of issues that come from relying on these apps. So first of all, we should understand how prevalent dating apps are. I think most people realize how prevalent they are nowadays. A lot of studies show a lot of different numbers, but I've seen as high as 50 or 60% of all new relationships being started on dating apps, which in and of itself is not a bad thing. I think a lot of people find very meaningful relationships on dating apps, and that's great. The problem is that relying on them so heavily has caused other issues downstream of just, finding new partners. And I think one of those main issues is this feeling that there's an overabundance of options. Now, that definitely seems to come more as an issue on the side of women, because for one thing, women make up a much smaller number of the pool on dating apps. I've seen numbers anywhere from like 25 to 30% of users are women and 65 to 75% are men. When you combine that with the fact that women have historically been the choosier sex, men tend to pursue and women are the ones who choose, that has just become even more skewed with the fact that there's much more men on dating apps. So, it's harder to be selected, so to speak, as a man. And you hear a lot of complaints about, that the top 1 to 10% of men getting all of the attention on the dating apps. But I think this issue of overabundance can affect the average man as well, because I like to think about evolutionary psychology when we talk about dating. I do think that it's important to look at it from that lens, because at the end of the day, we do still have the same brains that we had tens of thousands of years ago. So if we want to go back to tribal times, there's that magic number of 150. So let's assume you're in a tribe of 150 people. If you're looking for someone of the opposite sex, that cuts you down to 75 immediately. And then let's say people in your age range, that would be a viable mate. Maybe you're down to like 30 people out of that 75. And then since it's such a small tribe, probably 10 of those 30 are fairly closely related to you. So unless you're a tribe in West Virginia, then you're down to 20 people who are viable mates for you. Now compare that to today, and you can swipe through, even if you're a man on a dating app, you can swipe through 20 women in literally 60 seconds. And we're just simply not wired to have that many options when it comes to mates. I think the other problem with dating apps that I don't really see anyone talking about is not only the issue of it being harder to get into relationships because there's this overabundance of options. A lot of things fizzle out so quickly. People ghost one another all the time. I think the other issue is that these like situationship type deals are often caused because there's this like false security from the dating apps that you can just easily find someone better. So rather than get into a committed relationship with the person that you've already spent time with, as soon as one little issue arises or there's like this red flag, instead of just working through that and forming a stronger bond from that, you have this feeling of like, oh, I can just go back on the app and find someone better. So although dating apps, I think, are a big culprit of today's issues in the dating scene, I think there are some other points that we should talk about. For women specifically, women are pursuing careers at a much higher rate than they did in decades past, which surface level is a great thing. And I want to be clear that I don't think women should leave the workforce. Certainly not. But some of the things that happen downstream of that is, women are spending their 20s focusing on their careers and are less worried about getting into relationships. They're less worried about having kids, which again seems fine surface level. And for a lot of women, that's great. That's exactly what they want to do. But I think what people don't think about is, a lot of these women, once they start approaching 30 or get into their 30s, they really want that connection with someone. They want to start having children. And if they don't already have a partner, the unfortunate truth is that by normal societal standards, they've lost a lot of their potential mates because the men around their age that they might be interested in, well, they're now competing with other women who are in their early to mid 20s. So they have a lot more competition now, which makes it very difficult for them. And while I think it's great that women have so many more career opportunities, I think the thing that we don't talk about as much is the fact that not only is it that they have an option to pursue careers, it's more so that they're obligated to pursue careers because financially it's so important for most households to have two incomes. With the insane inflation that we've seen, especially if you're thinking about having kids, the growing cost of having children, most people just cannot get by on one income. So it's not just that women have the option of having a career, it's for most people, they have to pursue a career. So you certainly can't blame the women who are putting off marriage and children to pursue careers. They really, most of them need to do that. And then when we shift our focus to men and why men are not committing to relationships as much, I think the big thing that comes up there is, of course, internet pornography. I think especially for younger men who have grown up with access to porn as early as they can remember, it's such an immediate dopamine hit. It's like if you're a young man and you have the option between porn or you have the option between trying to pursue women on these dating apps where, you're competing with so many other men, it's not a surprise why a lot of these young men are just settling for what they can get on the computer. And I definitely see a lot more people talking about this issue recently. So I was hopeful that maybe viewership is going down or trending down. And I looked into that a little bit and that does not appear to be the case, unfortunately. I think the market for that is only growing still. So I don't know what the answer to that is, but I think it's a major issue. Like I said, more people are talking about it, which I think is great. I think that's the start of trying to solve that problem. The last point I'll hit on for this phenomenon of marriage happening less and happening later. One study I saw from 2021 surveyed people asking them if they thought marriage was outdated or old-fashioned. And apparently 29% of men agreed and 38% of women agreed, which was another number that just surprised me. And it's no wonder that people would be putting off marriage or not getting married at all if they feel it's just this antiquated thing that they no longer need to pursue. So that brings us to the question of what can we do to try to correct some of these issues that have arisen. First off, let me say that any advice I give on this is advice for myself as much as it is for anybody else. I am certainly not a dating coach. I'm not a love guru. Like I mentioned in the beginning, have had struggles of my own. So I am trying to figure out how to navigate this world just as much as you are. But I do think there are some things that we can talk about and try to implement just to, help navigate this new world that we're in. So first off, being the obvious and something that I think most people do is taking breaks from the dating apps. You hear a lot about, pretty much anyone I've talked to, any of my friends who use the dating apps, the sentiment really feels the same all the way around. For both men and women. It's just, they get tired of them, but for the most part, they stay on them because it feels like the only way to meet people, which I can totally relate to. The frequency that I meet new people has diminished so much throughout my 20s, which partially is, on me. I need to put myself out there more. And which brings me to the next point. Not only should you take a break from the apps, you should figure out ways that you can put yourself out there and meet new people organically, going to events that are frequented by young people in your community, whether that's, I hear run clubs talked about a lot. Really, I think it's just anything that you are truly interested in where people that you are interested in dating would also be at. If you're a man looking for a woman and you're into jujitsu, that's great and you should do that. But as far as I'm aware, not a ton of women do jujitsu, so it may not be your best chance of meeting someone. I think the other thing we need to hit on more, and I'm guilty of this just as much as anybody else, is understanding the difference between settling with someone and settling for someone. This just goes back to the seemingly overabundance of options that we have. It's so easy to feel like you can just find someone better rather than putting in the work and really getting to know the person that's in front of you at that moment. So we talk about like settling down, right? And I think settling down or settling down with someone, unfortunately, it's so closely related to settling for someone. When really they're just completely different. If you meet someone and there are obvious moral issues or things that would just cause the long-term relationship to unravel, then obviously you don't want to settle down with that person. At that point you would be settling for them. But I think far too often we're not willing to put in the work of really getting to know someone and giving something a shot. And we think there's someone better out there. And last but not least, I think just don't ghost people. I think I can honestly say I've never truly ghosted anyone. Now, I will say if two people go on a date and both of you don't text each other, then I don't really see that as ghosting. If you both don't reach out, then I would assume both parties are not interested in pursuing anything further. But I think I can honestly say I've not responded to someone. But yeah, I think it's just kind of disrespectful. You can make up a white lie. You don't have to tell someone you're not physically attracted to them. But I think at least letting them know that you're not interested in seeing them anymore, I think that's the least you can do. But yeah, that's all I got. This is a crazy world that we're trying to navigate. And if you have any tips that I didn't mention that you think have worked for you to navigate the modern dating scene, I'd love to hear that down in the comments. And if you are someone who's starting to lose hope, I think just stay strong. Just like anything else worth pursuing in life, you got to stick with it, usually longer than you think you need to. But I think there's someone out there for you. So keep searching, and I'm sure you'll find them. That's all I got. Peace.